Car enthusiasts and BMW purists in particular, I'm sure, are not very well taken to crossover SUVs, but this one right here is quite a cool one, and I think it should be an exception for any enthusiast who's a diehard against crossover SUVs. This is the only BMW X3M. BMW has gone through many different generations of their most popular model to date, the X3, which is their mid-size crossover, and mid-size crossovers are really the hot thing right now. But not a lot of companies have taken their mid-size crossover offerings and made high-performance versions of them because it's kind of stupid. But for one generation and one generation only, BMW graced us with the X3M. This car is basically, literally an M3 on stilts. It's fitted with the S58 engine and 8-speed sport automatic transmission from the BMW M3, and it has an X3 body over the top of it to make the most literal definition of an X3M, as you can see. But BMW doesn't do the X3M anymore, probably because of the fact that BMW M purists don't want anything to do with an X3, no matter how much S58 goodness it has underneath the hood. And people that want an expensive, fast BMW SUV normally just go for an X5M, an X6M, an X5M50, M60, that kind of thing. So the X3M was in a little bit of a weird spot, which makes it a bit of a more obscure M vehicle. And I'm here to say that this is one of the coolest modern BMWs that you can buy, especially for the price that these things are getting down to. You can find X3Ms all day for under $50,000. And that is kind of a steal when you consider the fact that one, it was so expensive to begin with, and two, it's an M3 and an X3 body. And that is pretty cool indeed. It's worth noting at this point that I have a review of a standard X3 of this generation, an xDrive 30i. That's the one that you see most people driving around in, linked on the screen right now. I also have a review of the brand new 2025 X3 30 xDrive, which should be linked on the screen at some point as well. So I'd suggest watching those because those are more consumer-oriented X3s. This is the crazy 500 horsepower idiotic version. So for me, as a car enthusiast, this is about as good as it gets when it comes to a mid-size crossover. So let's take a review type tour of the 2024 X3M. So yes, normally the BMW X3 is about as cool as a mom who says she likes Call of Duty, but the X3M is a different story. And to prove that to people that would normally just pass it off as any other X3, this X3M has a lot of cosmetic upgrades on the outside that are noticeable yet subtle, so that people who are paying attention, car enthusiasts, can tell that this is no ordinary regular X3 S-Drive 18D. This is the cool one, the 500 horsepower S58 twin turbo 6-cylinder one. And as you can see, they did a pretty good job taking the regular X3 and M-ifying it, especially in this lovely blue color here, to make it look a little bit more sporty, but not excessive. It's got massive 21-inch M wheels and special M brakes on each corner. And then you move to the door mirrors, which are typical M-style door mirrors where they have that floating post at the top. Looks very M-like. And you move to the back where you have a special subtle M spoiler. And then you move down to the bottom where you see an M diffuser. So I think they did a really good job on the styling of this X3M. And the styling of the regular G05 X3 is just pretty nice to begin with, especially in the facelift, which is what we have here. It was subtle, it was luxurious looking, and it looked pretty nice, which is something that is not to be said about the current X3 in my opinion. I'm not a big fan of how that one looks. Backseat of the X3M, now it's worth noting for everybody, I'm 6'3", and this driver's seat is in my driving position, which is pretty much all the way back, and I've got absolutely no legroom back here. It's a bit difficult to get in back here, especially since these are not your standard X3 seats. They are special M Sport seats that are a little bit bulkier for some extra support for the front seat passengers. But the downside of that is there's no room back here for my legs, and there's also no storage pocket back here, which is a bit unusual. But there are a couple upgrades over the standard regular X3 xDrive 30i I reviewed, namely standard sun visors right here, which are very nice, and carbon fiber trim, which is quite interesting. You also have a bit more stitching back here than you have in the regular X3 to make the interior look a little bit more expensive and high class, and that's nice. And once again, carbon fiber in the back of an X3 is interesting, but you know. And then in the center, you have a fold-down armrest with some lovely cup holders right there, and that's nice to see. You also have a transmission hump that is the same size basically as the regular X3. It's no bigger, which is nice, but it is still there, so middle seat passengers might have a hard time, but at least they're not wedging their knees behind these massive M seats that were clearly not designed for the X3. But to add to the comfort, you have two USB-C outlets on the bottom right here and a single zone climate control setup with heated rear seats. Also, huge panoramic sunroof back here. Same thing as in the regular X3, but it's worth noting because it's providing some lovely light for the rear passengers. And in terms of other upgrades back here over the regular X3, you have these special seats that are a bit nicer looking. They've got this quilted leather pattern in the center, which is nice. They're full leather, of course, as you'd expect, with more of this lovely contrast stitching that we saw on the door panel. And of course, you have to have your M seat belts so that your 5-year-old kid that gets back here can put this on, and he probably won't even realize because he's too busy playing Fortnite back here or something. But it's nice to see M stripes on the rear seat belts of an X3. That's pretty cool. So that's it when it comes to rear seat stuff back here. A couple upgrades over the regular X3, but it's largely the same. So let's move it along and go up front. Front in the X3M, and as you'd expect from the back seat, it's about the same as the regular X3 up here, except there are some special M touches. Take this special M automatic gear selector right here, trimmed in the M colors, which operates the 8-speed M Sport automatic transmission, which is shared with the BMW M3, and it's here with an M logo in the top and a little rocker switch right here to control how fast the shifts are. That's not something that your mom has in her S-Drive 18D X3, that's for sure. What she also doesn't have are the M mode setup and exhaust buttons. So M mode puts your car in M mode, which puts the digital gauge cluster in a more focused, track-oriented layout. Setup controls your drive controls, all of these things, so you can configure your engine for Sport Plus, chassis in Sport Plus, although I wouldn't recommend it. We'll come back to that. Steering in Sport Plus, but unfortunately you cannot put your M xDrive into two-wheel drive only like you can in the M3 Competition xDrive. Unfortunately, you cannot do drifting in this X3M, which is a bummer. And then this exhaust button down here, when you press it, it makes your exhaust louder. And what annoys me is that in this car, it defaults to being loud. I would prefer it to default to being, I don't know, quiet, but hey, you know, that's just me. And you have a special M digital gauge cluster all the way over there, which has a speedometer that goes up to 200 miles per hour. No doubt the first time a 200 mile per hour speedometer has been put in an X3. And it's basically a similar gauge cluster to what you have in a regular X3, but once again, some M touches to it. You have more focus on your gear layout, and you have this configurable mode here where you can cycle through things like your trip computer, your fuel economy, which is a joke in an X3M, your tire pressure, which is something that the regular X3 has. It has this configurable gauge cluster that shows you some information, but it does not have a graph that shows you how much power your engine's producing, and it does not have a graph that shows you whether your engine's in Sport Plus or not. But largely, it's a pretty similar gauge cluster to what you have in a regular X3. It's just adapted to be M-ified for the X3M. Also, you have a special M steering wheel that would be shared with an M3 as well. It's got M stitching around the rim, and it has these two M1 and M2 buttons around the sides for your configurable drive mode shortcuts. So M2 you can use for your super sporty driving mode, and M1 can be your driving home from work mode. They're configurable drive mode shortcut buttons right there, as most M cars have. Also, on the left side, you have some controls for your radar guided cruise control, which also has an auto steer function, which is nice to see. That's an option on a regular X3. It's standard here on the X3M. It's also heated right here and has an M logo on the bottom. It's a nice bulky M steering wheel as you'd expect, and it fits pretty well in this car. Also, I'm just jumping around at random things that I look at, but carbon fiber trim as you had in the back seats around the door panel and the dashboard here, something you don't see in a regular X3, but it's here on the X3M and makes a lot of sense. And you have iDrive 7, which I've gone over many times. Not going to go much into detail on it this time, obviously, but iDrive 7 offers pretty much everything that you'd want. It has navigation, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and it's not overbearing, it's not overly complicated, and critically, it does not have the climate controls shoved into a stupid submenu. Instead, the climate controls are right below here, and they are in fact physical buttons, which is nice, because you don't have to take your eyes off the road to operate your climate. Exactly the same as a base level X3, except for the fact that not only do you have heated seats up front, you have ventilated seats up front. I believe that was available on the X3M 40i, but it was standard here on the X3M, and that adds to the comfort up here, which is nice. It's basically the same fundamentally as a regular X3, but you have some X3M upgrades like the ventilated seats, like the M steering wheel, and you get to look at a 200 mile per hour speedometer as you drive along in your X3, which is pretty bonkers. Underneath the hood here of the X3M, and you find out what makes this the M variant of the X3, which is the S58 twin turbo 3-liter 6-cylinder engine that in this application, the M competition, develops 503 horsepower and 443 pound-feet of torque. There was a slightly lower end version of the X3M called the X3M with a little bit less power than the competition, 473, but the same torque figure, once again, 443. This X3 was actually the first execution of the S58 because the X3M came out right before the G80 M3. So this was the first taste that we got of the now legendary S58. It's legendary for its power delivery, it's legendary for its tunability, and I'm sure down the line it'll be legendary for its unreliability, as most M engines are. But again, 3-liter twin turbo 6-cylinder, 503 horsepower, and a 0 to 60 time of 3.7 seconds, which is crazy for an X3. Let's take this X3M competition out on the road and see how it drives. Let's go. Okay, here we are driving the X3M. I've been waiting to do a video of an X3M for quite a while because I have some thoughts about it, particularly the way it drives. So, all right, complaints first. The biggest complaint by a country-wide margin is this ride quality. It is appallingly awful. I mean, it is the worst riding SUV I've ever been in my life. I've got the chassis in comfort right now, and it feels like I'm driving it down a cobbled cliff. It is so desperately uncomfortable. They wanted to make this thing drive like an M3, so they made it ride like an M3, and for an X3, that is unacceptable. When you drive an X3M, you can feel the paint on the road surface itself, and you can tell whether it's orange or whether it's white. I can not only notice the outside part, but also the actual cover part, the little lid in the middle. I could notice both of those things. You get an amazing amount of feedback from the road directly into your spine when you drive one of these things. The ride in the X3M is just terrible. Unacceptable, awful. Sure, yeah, when it comes to handling, this thing is the best handling X3, probably best handling midsize SUV you can ever drive, because they just made the suspension rock hard. They welded the suspension up or something. It's just terrible. Worst standard ride quality from the factory ever. It's just so uncomfortable to drive these things, and I could not imagine driving one of these things every day and putting up with this ride every day. It's just so bad. And I have it in comfort mode. I'm complaining here and I'm whining about how awful the ride quality is, and it's in comfort. I'm not putting it in Sport Plus and cheating because I can't afford a chiropractor. I'm not gonna do that. But I do have the engine in Sport Plus. So we're gonna find out in a second here the positive part of the X3M driving experience. Yes, it rides like an M3, and that, in my opinion, is a very bad thing for an X3 to do. But the benefit is it drives like an M3. More so than you'd expect. So gear change in its most ferocious quick setting, engine in Sport Plus, 503 horsepower in this version. Oh yeah, that S58 screams, people. It's got so much power. 503 horsepower, and it's probably underrated. 0 to 60 in 3.7 seconds is all you need to hear, and I completely 100% believe that. And like I said, for an X3, this thing handles exceedingly well. It does not have nearly as much body roll as it should, but when you feel the ride, you definitely understand why. The S58 isn't my favorite M engine. I don't like the laggy and over-energetic nature that it has, especially if you're trying to drive one of these things every day. I'm not really a big fan of the S58 when it comes to daily driving, but when you open it up, it's a monster, a total monster. The fact that they put the S58 in an X3 and they pulled out all the stops to make a full-on X3M. All the stops meaning terrible ride quality, high price. They didn't care. They thought, you know what, let's make a full-on M X3 and see what people think about it. And I guess maybe they didn't sell enough because it was a one and done type thing. Unfortunately, this is the only one that we're gonna get. Hopefully they do another one at some point though, because I can get used to this. Woo! Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I could definitely get used to a car that drives like that. Lots and lots of power, lots and lots of synthetic sound through the speakers, but hey, it's not a bad type of sound, and if you don't pay attention to the fact that it's synthetic sound, it's quite nice, and it puts a good smile on your face. And again, it's funny because I'm sitting in an X3 in M bucket style seats, and I'm looking down at a 200 mile per hour speedometer, and I'm actually believing that it could do that. I imagine if you put children in the back there, you can get them to throw up pretty quickly. The way this thing handles and the way it rides, you're gonna be cleaning up chunks back there if you're using this as a family vehicle. It's crazy, it's insane, it's special, it's cool, it rides horribly. It's so desperately uncomfortable, but that's really the only downside. It is quite a big downside for me. And it was expensive, but we got it, and it's cool to be driving a full-on X3M. So yeah, X3M, everybody. It has its flaw, its big flaw, but overall, it is a super, super cool ride. So with that being said, I'm gonna end that video there. I hope everybody enjoyed. Like, subscribe, do all the normal YouTube stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.